How would your business change if you were making 10 times more money?
We don't need any sponsorship for us to do this thing. We're going to still do it.
You called it a business. Can't be a business if you don't make money.
How do you know what numbers are impressive?
The numbers, it's my hell yeah number.
Now, what if there's a particular event that has a deadline for?
Have you gotten actual pushback on some of the monetization efforts that you've made that you guys are selling out? How dare you?
No.
So where does this come from then? I want this to be heart-led. I want to do well and I want to make money, but if we make too much money, then everyone's gonna turn on us. Would you feel wrong? Would you feel somehow dirty or like it was not ethical to make 10 times as much as you are now?
I feel like you've made me realize that, of course, it's a relationship, it's an engagement, it's about trying to just open up a conversation so that you can continue to figure out how you might collaborate and bring value and cheer to each other.
Great takeaways, Justin.
Yeah, so helpful.
Really appreciate this. Hey, I'm Matt.
And I'm Parul.
And we're the co-founders of the London Writers Salon, and we are a global community of writers. We do interviews and workshops for writers every month. We have a membership, and also we run Writers Hour, which is a daily writing sprint held 4 times a day. And it's free. We do have members supporting it as well. We have about 700-800 writers writing together in silence every day at those Writers Hours.
Super cool. How long has Writers Hour or LWS been around? And have you ever monetized it in any way other than the membership? Or give me a little bit of context of how this started.
The London Writers Salon started in 2019. So our first event was in 2019. We started off as an in-person event series. It was a bit of a hobby. Matt was in London. I'm still in London. And we would just meet with writers and interview writers on the topic of writing and creativity. We're medium agnostic, so all types of writers, whether you're writing a novel or a play, non-fiction, poetry, it all goes. And the pandemic, it was an acceleration point for us. Because the world was going into lockdown, we really didn't know what to do. We knew we'd take our interviews online, but we also thought about trying to create a safe space for the community to write. So we started something called Writers Hour. It was a 10-day experiment. What if Matt and I were to write together every day for 2 weeks, basically, invite everyone we knew, just write in silence. That's all we can offer, companionship and creativity. And that expanded. And so today we have 4 Writers Hours every day, and we have 700 to 800 people joining us. And that's how it began. And quite early on, someone asked the question, how can we support you? And Matt quite quickly said, I'll figure that out.
Yeah, and in 2019, it was an interview series, and we did sell tickets from day one. And from day one, there was an entry fee. It was pretty low, but anyone who wanted to come, you just bought a ticket to attend the interview. And then, like Parul said, Writers Hour, it was free. We had no intention of monetizing it. And it was, I think, day 2 or 3, someone said, I got more writing done in this hour than I had in the last 6 months. Do you guys have a Patreon or something? And we said, no, but tomorrow we will. And then the next day, we set up a Patreon with 3 different tiers, and we said, hey, if you got value out of this writing session, you're welcome to help support it as a member. And then Parul said we did this for 2 weeks. This was our 2-week experiment, but when we got to the end of that 2 weeks, we used the Patreon to say, should we continue this? And this was, if you remember, back in the pandemic days, March 2020, we all thought, this will probably blow over in a couple weeks, right? That didn't happen. So at the end of the 2 weeks, we said, well, if we get 10 patrons, we'll do it for another 2 weeks. And then when those 2 weeks hit, we said, okay, if we get 25 patrons, we'll continue for another month. And we kind of used that ongoing throughout 2020 until eventually we said, okay, if we get, I forget the number, 50 patrons, we'll do it through the end of the year. And then at some point, it just became ongoing. More people kept coming, more people kept supporting, and that was how we Writers Hour, and then our online membership has blossomed into what it is.
The one thing that we've added on membership is courses. So we do offer courses because we are with the writers every day. We know the kinds of questions they have when we're trying to solve those problems. How do I find a literary agent for my novel? How do I write a picture book? How do I create a Substack newsletter? How do I go from an idea of a book to a really fully fledged outline of a book, and how do I go beyond that? So we've got courses as well.
Yeah, one thing that I was surprised by when I first came into y'all's orbit was that the core product is free. It seems like, right? It's you can show up on Zoom. You don't have to pay anything really. You don't have to join the Patreon. You don't really have to do anything. You can just show up there all the time, right? And I think that's a really unique aspect of your product. And so we're here to talk primarily about sponsorships, right? Because it sounds like this is not really an avenue that you've explored much. Maybe you've dabbled with it a bit, but But I sensed, from some of our early conversations that there's a bit of a hesitancy of like going full force into this, right? I'm wondering if you can share a little bit about some of the hesitancies or concerns that you have about maybe being too salesy, or, all of a sudden you're corporate shills and it's like, running counter to the ethos of the brand that you've built over the last several years. So I'm wondering if you can touch on that a bit.
My background is in the publishing industry, so I'm very sensitive to the nature of creativity and how hard it is for writers to make a living, and don't want any writer or creative to feel as though what we're doing might be counter to the beautiful art that they're creating. And money and art can be quite a contentious combination in this world. So I think some of the hesitation is we have created such a beautiful community, and as you say, it's quite unique to be able to offer these free writing hours, writers' hours, every single day. I want to be very careful to not destroy any of that magic or mix it too much to make it corporate. We are a heart-led community.
I think we're very protective of our community as well. And so we want, and we respect the people in the room too. Anything that we share or stand behind, it's us standing behind it. So we want to make sure we're representing both something we're proud to represent, but also we're respecting the people that have become members and are helping support this space. So I think it's about protecting the space, but also respecting the people that we serve every day.
Have you gotten actual feedback or pushback on some of the monetization efforts that you've made that you guys are selling out, or like, how dare you? Have you ever gotten that feedback?
No, I mean, I think when we've tossed the idea
So
out
where does this come from then?
Yeah. I think it's mostly personal. We don't want to feel that. We've tossed it out before to say, hey, we're thinking about like, what if we had a sponsor for Writers Hour, one that we felt really good about, one that we felt proud to say, Writers Hour is brought to you by whatever thing, like Moleskine notebooks or something that like, we all love Moleskine notebooks, like that feels good. But there's always that one person that's like, don't sell out. I'm sure we got one comment in there, and that kind of is like, it's like the thought in the back of your head.
We've had drip feeds of comments, but when we do things like State of the Salon every year, we talk about our ambitions and dreams, and there's always someone or more than one person who'll say things like, don't you get too big, don't you change the way this feels. We're like, almost like we're trusting you, don't ruin this. And some of this is definitely self-projected because we're so conscious that it is quite hard to get a community that's so loving and gentle and curious and creative. Some of it definitely is projected from ourselves, and some of it are just maybe the rare voices in the community.
What are you personally sacrificing, both of you, by continuing to run this?
I guess there are always alternative things. So before, when Matt and I first met, I was a full-time freelance editor. That's been my identity for quite some time. I loved it. I love being in story and narrative. My happy place is working with writers. And this is a different direction for me. I love it. I absolutely love it. But of course, there is a sacrifice of a different path. And this is different from any work I've ever done before because it's our own business. And so we live and breathe it day and night. So it kind of, you care about everybody. There's a lot that goes into as you all know, there's a lot that goes into running a community like this.
I want to latch on to something you said. You called it a business. It's a business. Can't be a business if you don't make money. Right? You can't forward your mission without it being sustainable. And so it sounds as though to date, you've kind of tiptoed into monetization efforts. The Patreon's an easy one because it's like no one has to sign up for it, right? It's like if you really like what we do, you can support us. It's like like a tip jar type idea, right? Now I understand there may be like tiers of things they get access to if you patronize certain tiers, from what I understand. And I just wanted to call that out because I think that's it's a really interesting block I think a lot of people have when it comes to conflating the art and the business stuff, is that somehow these are mutually exclusive. And it's interesting to me that you're delving into the education side of it as well, because that seems service-based, probably a little bit more. It's like, okay, I'm going to teach you an outcome. I'm going to say, hey, you go through this thing. I'm going to teach you how to find a publisher. I'm going to teach you how to do X, Y, Z, whatever. It's like, but somehow when people think about sponsorships, it's not service-based. It's like, oh, it's like the only people that are benefiting off of this is us personally as creators. And I think that's a block actually, which is that your goal should be to take sponsors that are helping people achieve an outcome as well. And so it's going and doing some psychographic introspection as well as psychographic actual surveys with your audience and learning more. It sounds like you already know quite a bit about what's going on in their lives, what blocks they have, what's keeping them up at night, what challenges they have. And then the goal is like, okay, let's go out there and find sponsors who can help them with this type of thing, whether it's Moleskine Notebook or whether it's some other BetterHelp. I don't know, right? Like, but probably a lot of people have emotional trauma that's preventing them from being able to write. Like that's a weird example, but like, that's a service-based approach when it comes to sponsorships. So this is maybe totally out of left field, but like, how does this sit with you?
Totally. I think with the right sponsor, it would feel very heart-led. Like, we're here to share this with you. And how awesome is it that we get to do this with this brand? So yeah, I do believe there's a possibility there that I think.
Okay, Matt, I'm not going to let you off the hook there. What are you personally sacrificing?
I mean, I guess so. We're in a fortunate position that through membership. So and I just want to maybe go back a little bit. So we did about a year and a half ago. We did make a slight reframe from like the PBS model of like, hey, if you get value from this, support it, to like, hey, this is a membership, there's a price. We have put a price on Writer's Hour now, but we give it away for free for anyone who needs it. So it's a slightly different shift. So we have made that shift, and we're in a fortunate position that we are able to run this full time through member supported space. That said, I mean, there's always, if I think about what I'm sacrificing, I guess like I could be maybe doing work elsewhere, maybe making more money somewhere else. I actually don't feel there's a whole lot being sacrificed, because I feel like we're on that path. I feel like we're both doing good work, and I do see a promise of this continuing to grow. That's why I struggle to find what's being sacrificed, because I feel like, and I've been trying to do this for like over a decade, merge like something I love to do with something that pays.
I'm going to make a statement, and you can disagree with it if you want, but somehow the vibe that I'm getting from both of you is that your goal is to like eke out a living. I want this to be heart-led. I want to like do well, and I want to make money, but if we make too much money, then everyone's going to turn on us. And maybe I'm like misrepresenting with the vibe that I'm getting, but like that's how it feels to me. Like, why? Like, let's stretch our imaginations. How would your business change if you were making 10 times more money? Do you think the community, the heart of the community would change? What different revenue model would you need to look at? Like first of all, like, would you feel wrong? Would you feel somehow dirty or like it was not ethical to make 10 times as much as you are now? Hey, real quickly, before we hear that answer, want to know the secret to unlocking reliable, recurring income and building a devoted community without all the headaches? Well, this video is brought to you by Uscreen, the all-in-one membership platform designed to make your life easier and your pockets fuller. See, I believe memberships are the future for many creators, but here's the game changer. Uscreen creators are profiting faster than they ever thought possible. In fact, over 70% of Uscreen creators become profitable within just 3 months. That's right, 3 months. Uscreen has helped creators earn more than $150 million a year and reaches over 10 million users. And you don't need millions of followers or hundreds of videos to start. Uscreen is for creators of all sizes looking to build a reliable, recurring income with their content and community. And talk about seamless, Uscreen takes care of everything from live streaming to chat rooms to in-depth analytics. They've got you covered, but here's the best part. Uscreen helps you create your own branded apps. Imagine having a Netflix-style membership experience, but just for your content. That's what Yoga with Adriene did with her app, Find What Feels Good. It's an amazing ad-free experience for her community, all built by Uscreen. Now, if you're worried about the tech stuff, don't be. Uscreen offers free content migration, best-in-class customer support, and a dedicated success manager to guide you every step of the way. Okay, the most important reason that you should check out Uscreen is that they're just awesome people. I've had multiple chances to hang out with folks on their team like Rob and Srey at a couple recent conferences, and they just couldn't be nicer and more dedicated to serving the creator community. So why settle for less when you can have more profits, more community, and more freedom? So to start your membership journey with Uscreen, click the link below.
I know theoretically that there's a place where it could feel right. I think the truth is I'm probably a little scared. Just this idea of, and we had this from the beginning when we started, when Writer's Hour started, the idea when there were 30 people in the room, there was this idea that, well, if this grew to 50, 60, 100, 200, the vibe in the room would change. And it hasn't actually. Maybe on some levels it has in some subtle ways, but by and large that atmosphere and vibe has continued because of the wonderful way that the hosts hold that community and that messaging that we've managed to keep across those 4 hours? And I know that in my heart, I'm still I both hold the idea that we can absolutely have 10 times the amount of people in a room, which is how I think about 10 times the business. Although obviously Writer's House is not the only way we might monetize that. And it would work. And I also think, but can you just imagine how busy it would get? Could you actually genuinely still have a heart in that? And I'm not sure. So I hold both. The reality is that we don't know until we try it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think like when you first asked that question, Justin, I thought because Parl and I are the way we are, if we were making 10 times as much, it's not like we would go run off like Scrooge McDuck and like, okay, great. Oh, we got all this money. Like, screw you all. No, we'd be like, I'm thinking, oh, wow, how can we support this group even more? We'd probably double the amount of writers' hours we could do. We would invest in more technology to like help people build a writing habit. Like we would pump it back in. We'd probably hire more people, do higher production on our show and podcast. So like we would invest a lot of that to help the people that we've gathered in the first place. So that's where my head went.
My job here is done, I think. Right? I mean, this is the mindset shift that I love helping people arrive at, who are very fearful of monetizing their art or their creativity, which is that I think basically everyone would probably sink that money, those excess profits back into making more art, making the process better, improving the experience for their customers and their members. And I think y'all are no different. You also brought this up, Parl, which is that 10 times as much money doesn't mean 10 times as many members in my mind. Like there's a lot of other ways in which you can, find leveraged revenue streams that aren't like directly related to like more, like higher quantity. I think sponsorships is a great example because, you have, again, built up this very engaged, intimate connection with your audience. There's lots of brands, lots of products, lots of services that you could go out there and find that would be very much heart-led, service-led, help them accomplish an outcome, just like education is, just like a course is that you guys would create. Another thing that I think might be missing from this whole envisioning of the business, of what the future of the business looks like, is involving your audience more in this conversation. Because I think that a lot of the hesitations, a lot of fears that I'm sensing come from an assumption of how they'll behave, how they'll react if we did X or if we did Y. I'm going to make a suggestion to you that when this interview is done, I want you to share it with them. I want you to share this with your community and say, this is something that we're thinking about. Would love your feedback on this. Please give us feedback on this. This is a big block for a lot of people, is just they make decisions from a place of fear. They let the paralysis of a future potential reality that may never manifest prevent them from taking strides or taking big swings in their business or their life. And I want to bestow y'all with this thought, which is that, are there decisions that we're not making because we're fearful of losing the heart, losing the essence of the community that we've built? And it sounds to me like the answer is yes.
Yeah. I think that's definitely been true. And I think what we're trying to do is now push ourselves to think a bit differently.
It's funny because I'm so sick this conversation about sponsorship. I'm actually sick that we've been talking about it so long and we haven't done anything about it. I'm so tired of myself and ourselves about this, just trying something, which is why this felt so exciting to get on this call with you to okay, let's use this as a impetus to say, okay, enough. We're going to try something. We're going to put something out there, whether it's with our current Writers Hour or we have this other project, this other event that we might do it toward as a test drive. I think we're ready. It's we're sick of ourselves thinking about this enough.
So we talked about the mindset pieces, the hesitations, all this stuff, but why has sponsorships been held up as this thing? We could do it, but we just keep pushing it off. Why is that?
I think it's not our natural home. I think in truth we've gone with the things that have just come a bit more easily, that have landed on our doorstep. So when someone has reached out to us and said, oh, we have had a few opportunities for sponsorship, that's when someone's actually reached out to us. But everything else that we've monetized is because it was literally sitting there. People were asking us, how can we support you? So now I think when we try and think about growing as a business, we then have to consider all the options. And sponsorship was there, but it was not the low-hanging fruit.
And I think we've also, riffing off of that, been just super obsessed about serving the group of people that are already with us. And often that looks like making the product better or launching these new things. So that's kind of, when given a choice, we're let's just make this thing better. It's maybe a cop out, but
no, it's not a cop out. I mean, I think this is how it happens for most people. Most people, you're right. Like most people don't think like, I'm going to go out and get sponsored. Like that's the first way in which I'm going to make money. Let's say you're a YouTuber. The first way is like, I want to get monetized and get AdSense. Like that's the easiest way because I'll just make my whatever videos I want. If people watch it, I get ad dollars, right? It's like the path of least resistance. So it's a very normal thing. The trap about sponsorships that I think not enough people appreciate is what I call the trap of inbound, which is feeling as though the sponsorships that come inbound to me, those are really the only or the main opportunities. I should just wait for brands, companies to come to me. If we build it, they will come type idea. And it seems like that's what happened, right? Because you had a few interests. Oh, I guess this is how it works. We'll just keep making the product better and they'll come to us. The trap with that though, is that when a brand or a company comes inbound to you, typically most everything is what I call fully baked, right? Where it's like they have a very specific thing that they want to promote. They've got probably a budget allocated to that. They've got some parameters, some pretty strict guardrails around like what they want to do. And so they're basically saying, take it or leave it. Most of the time, right? They're saying, hey, we've got $1,000, $1,500. Like, what can we do for that type idea, right? And you're like, oh, we could sponsor Writers Hour. Or we could do this, right? And so it's like, it to some degree, it's like, this is the form that sponsorships take for most creators. And because I ran an influencer agency for many years, what I have found to be almost a truism is that it is so much easier to develop heart-led, service-based sponsorships when it's actually you, the one reaching out and proposing something where it's kind of a blank slate to these sponsors, these partners. It's kind of out of left field. They weren't really expecting it, but it's not you coming and saying, hey, will you sponsor 24 Writers Hour? That's not what you're saying when you reach out to them. What you're saying is, yes, in the back pocket, that this is like an event that you have, let's say, that's coming up for you, or you have these other aspects of your business. What you're saying is you guys sit and strategize and think, okay, who is the 10 dream sponsors that we would love, or the 24 dream sponsors that we would love to have for this event? And you say, okay, let's go do 24 mini research projects to see what is going on in each of these companies or these brands' world. And your pitch is you're going to have 24 different pitches. You're going to say, for this brand over here, hey, Moleskine, I saw that you're releasing the new ABCXY model of the Moleskine that has new paper and different grids or whatever. We would love to help spread the word about this new model on hour 17 of our new project. And then pitch number 2 to BetterHelp or this other whatever, XYZ brand is going to be totally different. But the common denominator throughout all these pitches is, hey, I can help you accomplish this objective by sponsoring 24 Writers Hours. It's a really exciting, I think, realization for a lot of people to think like, wow, this is actually really can be very aligned with what we're actually trying to accomplish as a business. But instead of kind of doing the dog and pony show and hoping that brands will respond to this pitch, or responding to inbound inquiries that seem to be path of least resistance, we're actually in the driver's seat, and we can actually go out there and pitch our dream sponsors. So how does this sit?
Sounds really interesting. I'm curious, what do you think we should definitely not do in our pitches? Is there any sort of common mistakes that people make?
The biggest common mistakes is making it all about you. They don't care about you. They don't care who you are. They don't care how many members you have. There's lots of people who have built up engaged communities. Yeah, you to some degree, you're a large fish in a small pond, in that there's not an infinite amount of like writers groups, of course, but there's some. There's others out there that people have built. Just go in with the common assumption that they don't care who you are, they don't know who you are, and they're probably going to delete your email. So what can you do to encourage them to not just not delete it, but to respond? And the way to do that is to lead with what's important to them based on research that you have assumed based on the breadcrumbs that they're leaving on the internet.
That makes sense. I have another question. There are quite a few brands that we have worked with before in the past and done a lot of essentially promotional material for them that's been very, very helpful and aligned for our community. And now we're reaching out to them to say, hey, friend, because there is some kind of level of friendship. Hey, friend, we would love for you to take part. And this time we're actually asking for money. Now, some of these are larger corporate, established companies like Substack or Medium, and some of them will be smaller. Any advice on how we approach those people?
Don't approach it from a patronage perspective. Don't approach it, be like, you want to be aligned with us because of what we represent as an organization. Brands have very few of those dollars. Dollars they have is budgets for their own initiatives. So if Substack is coming out with a new AI feature to help you get unblocked creatively, That's what you lead with. Hey, we'll help you spread the word about that new feature. That's what they have budgets allocated for. Maybe they have some discretionary budgets for, on an annual basis, 1-2% of their marketing spend, maybe to support kind of like charitable initiatives to some degree. It's funny. I was speaking with someone who had a nonprofit recently who had similar questions like, hey, can you help me as a sponsorship coach? Like help me get donations for my, and you know, the conversation that we had was like, your goal as a nonprofit should not be to go in there and try to get a sliver of the DEI budget or a sliver of the charitable budget or whatever, because again, like that's a very small percentage of their overall advertising strategy. The goal as a nonprofit, I'm not saying you're a nonprofit, but I'm just saying like it's the same approach. It's like the goal is to go out there and be like, what is going on in their world? What is important to them? What are they allocating money for? And so when you go to the Substacks of the world and you go to the Mediums of the world, I would suggest this is a strategy. Is like, what does it seem like? Rather than being like, please, like, can I have some more? You know, that GIF, right? That old movie, right? It's like, no, you don't want that. You want to say, hey, you're coming from a place of strength. Let me help you accomplish a business outcome. That's way easier for them your contact to go to their superior and say, hey, like, if we sponsor the LWS for this event, we can help maybe move the needle on this quarterly KPI, this quarterly key performance indicator that we have.
And what if they don't have an obvious update? I'm thinking of certain software programs where it doesn't seem like they've had any major update.
Ask them what is coming down the pipe for you over the next quarter. What are the big initiatives? What's going on in your world? If you have existing relationships with these people, you can say, hey, you know, we've got some cool, exciting stuff going on in our world. Would love to hop on a phone call, learn more about what's going on, what's coming down the pipe for y'all for the next 6-12 months. And see how we can support that.
And I'm curious, what about, so something like you mentioned BetterHelp, you know, and if you look at something like a podcast, something that it seems like, just based on my listening habits, you listen to a podcast, this is sponsored by this, it seems like their goals are, and I might be wrong, it's like purely, okay, how many people are listening? What's the reach of this thing? Which feels less of a, kind of the way you're pitching this is like, okay, what is your specific goal versus we just need eyeballs and ears for this. I'm curious how those two propositions differ.
Perhaps BetterHelp was not the best example because you're right. BetterHelp definitely is a scale play. Like they have achieved a level of, scale as their organization that, yeah, you're right. They're going out there trying to sponsor as many podcasts as possible. They're engaging agencies to help them place. And in fact, I have a video on my YouTube channel where I actually showed what these spreadsheets look like, so for example, BetterHelp as a company, they would hire what's called a media agency. Okay, and a media agency is the agency that runs point on their entire marketing strategy, their entire advertising strategy. So if they're doing broadcast TV ads or they're doing magazine print ads, they're running digital media, and yeah, maybe working with creators, podcasters, YouTube, etc., is like a tactic as part of the larger media mix. And so what would happen is that their media agency would send out what's called an RFP, or a request for proposal, to other agencies. So they'd go out there and try to subcontract other agencies who specialized in influencer marketing, in creator partnerships, and podcast insertions, and things like this. And so when I ran an agency, I would be on the receiving end of these RFPs. And what these spreadsheets look like, it basically was like a bunch of rows. It was like, okay, publisher name, or like show name, average downloads, average cost per insertion, like host read ad or mid-roll ad, or like, it was like this very formulaic thing. And you're right, that is a scale play. If you are too much, if you they have this like napkin math where they're like, okay, if the show gets this many downloads and exceeds this CPM or whatever, like, let's just switch them out with someone else. They just don't care about you. It's scale, right? And so to your point, the goal definitely should be to go out there and find sponsors who that's not their play. To clarify, actually, like any brand worth their salt, I think BetterHelp would absolutely fit. Every brand worth their salt has different strategies, right? So like they may have one scale strategy. They may have some other brand awareness type tactics that they're doing in other areas and other fashions, because you should be doing all these things as a brand. But for where you're at in the kind of genesis of your business, I think it probably makes more sense to probably not go after brands who are at that level, but maybe more kind of the smaller to mid-tier brands who do have, meaningful budgets to, and a brand awareness type thing would be meaningful to them, or being able to, like, this is another, I think, going back to Parl, what you were saying about like, how do we make 10 times more money if it's not 10 times, the amount of like, participants. One thing that's very hard to measure is like both of you the influence that you've built as the founders of this organization. Don't you think that if you were to go to some of these sponsors, some of these companies and say, hey, we would love to do a webinar for your customers brand, where we actually go and do some sort of presentation, something, where you are to email out your list of 100,000 customers. Hey, we're going to do this webinar with Matt and Parle from the London's Writer Salon about X. Come and sign up. Brands are desperate to talk about anything other than their products with their customers. And so, if you're able to leverage your basically kind of your name and likeness and the cachet, the reputation that you've built in this industry to help brands in other ways that have nothing to do with your community, like those partnerships exist, guaranteed, for people in your position.
And is that a separate, so I may be asking really basic questions here, is this a separate proposition from, say, us trying to get a sponsorship for the 24-hour writing sprint?
It could be both. It could be. So the way I look at it is that when you start having these 24 separate it doesn't have to be 24 separate conversations. I'm just saying, like, that if we're trying to get every hour sponsored or whatever, when you have these conversations, probably you're going to lead with, hey, we would love to do this for you. How does that sit? And then they're going to react to it. They're going to say, oh, that's great. Like, let's talk. Or they're going to be like, well, that's cool, but can we do this slightly different thing instead? And so that's your opening to say, oh, I didn't know that was something that you're trying to do. Well, if that's the case, it actually probably wouldn't make sense for you to sponsor the 24 Writers Hours. It would make more sense for you to sponsor one of our, Writers Hours for the next month, or it would make more sense. And so the strategy that I always employ, as well as what I teach creators to do, is that your initial pitch, you're not hoping, oh, I hope that they pick this and there's nothing changed about it. It's like, no, the goal is to just get them something tangible to react to, so that now once you get information from them, you can pivot to something else. And so you should have all of these different things in your arsenal. You've got the Writers Hour, you've got this event in March, you've got a podcast, you've got all, the community space, you've got whatever it is, you've got all these kind of quivers in your, or arrows in your quiver of all the different ways in which you could potentially serve a brand partner. And every proposal, every pitch is going to be bespoke, because you're thinking in your head, how can I best serve my members? What's the best way in which I can activate with this sponsor to serve them in the best way? But also, how can I help them move the needle from a KPI perspective, to accomplish their objectives? It doesn't have to be this kind of, like I always say, like, sponsorships have to be win-win-win. Of course you're winning, because you're going to be, continuing to plow those dollars back into your community, right? And having a livelihood for yourself personally, which is totally fine. The sponsor is going to win because, again, you're going to help them accomplish an outcome, and then your audience is going to win. And I talk about this a lot, which is that if you're ever engaging with a sponsor and your audience or your community is not winning in any way, whether it's they're not getting a discount code or they're not getting exposed to a new product that they've never heard about or whatever it is, if there's an element there that's missing where they're not winning, you have to engineer it. You have to go back and say to the brand, like, hey, this is really exciting, and yeah, we're really into this, but could we give a discount code to our audience? Or, oh, could we give them some sort of exclusive access to XYZ or something? And then now selling it through to your audience is like, it feels great, because it's like, hey, we negotiated this awesome perk for you that wasn't there before.
Makes me think of Tim Ferriss and his Athletic Greens, and you get a free vitamin D if you sign up through him.
The funny thing about anyone who listens to podcasts, anyone who's like in space, is that they think that, like, the podcast ad read, that's what sponsorships are. You can do the podcast ad read, and it's this very kind of like, let me just read from a script. Tim is great about it, obviously, but like a lot of creators, it's just like, let me read from the script. It like feels very robotic. It feels not really. It's just like, got to do it, or it's like the pause for the commercial break, this type of idea. Honestly, what I'm trying to do with having this platform and having this channel is say, like, sponsorships can be whatever you want them to be. They don't have to be limited to just this like robotic ad read. Like, you can be, you're only limited by your own creativity.
No, I love this. I feel like you've made me realize that, of course, it's a relationship, it's an engagement with the other party. It's about trying to just open up a conversation so that you can continue to figure out how you might collaborate and bring like value and cheer to each other.
Yeah, it's a door opener, and then seeing where the conversation leads. I do have a question though, Justin, because we've kind of talked around this idea. So we've been doing the daily Writers Hours. We've been doing every year in celebration of the anniversary of launching Writers Hour. We do this 24-hour writing sprint. So this is when we talk about it. That's this thing we're thinking. Well, what if this year we were to make it bigger and maybe use this as an event to be more clear about we're looking for sponsorship for that. So I guess I'm just thinking in light of what you just said, which is I'm totally on board with about creating a conversation. Now, what if there's a particular event that has, we have a deadline for, we're trying to launch it, that helps both kind of stir the blood in us to say, okay, we need to figure this out by this date. I'm just curious, when you have something timely with a relationship you're trying to kind of loosely see where it evolves to, how you might hold both of those at the same time. Like, what do we lead with the sprint, or do we lead with, hey, we just want to help, by the way, we have this sprint? I'm just thinking when we have something that we're aiming to launch.
When your pitch leads with, hey, I have this timeline, brand, you want to get on board with it? Like, let's go, this type of idea. You can imagine how that usually goes over, because especially if they don't know who you are, you don't have a pre-existing relationship, there's already a clock starting, I don't know you, probably not going to respond to that. It's like, maybe some brand, no, I'm not going to say never, but like some brands would be like, oh yeah, really exciting, let's be a part of this. Just assume that whoever you're reaching out to is going to be on a completely different timeline. And I absolutely would encourage you to use the writer's hour as what you're pitching in response to helping them accomplish some sort of outcome. And you can be very clear that like, hey, if you're interested in doing this, like we'd need to, kind of figure something out in the next like week or two. Honestly, it's like at the time of recording, we're about a month out. This is something, if you're going to really want to do this in the next week, I think you should be sending out a massive amount of pitches to try to get some conversation started. However, your goal from that exercise would not be to get sponsors for this. The goal would be to establish the relationship, because what happens is, again, going back to how brands allocate budgets from a marketing perspective, is that they have these very specific windows of when they're spending this money to accomplish their objectives. So if they want to get a certain number of users or a certain number of customers acquired or something by the end of the year, or by the end of the quarter or something, they're probably going to be deploying those marketing capital, those marketing dollars on Meta ads or Facebook ads or Google pay-per-click, or partnering with creators, like however they've chosen to accomplish that objective. And that varies for every different brand. They all have different goals and all this stuff too. And so just assume that when you reach out, they're not going to have money for you. Just have that be a baseline assumption. Just assume it's going to be a no. But it's not no, it's not yet. Because the goal of reaching out to these sponsors, and this is a perfect excuse to reach out and like talk about this, obviously, but just assume it's going to be a no. And so what's going to happen is that as you start to nurture the relationship, because the point is that you're going to pitch them and they're going to probably say no, and then you're going to follow up with them. You're going to stay on their radar. You're going to nurture them once a month, or hey, give them some recap of something that happened, provide value to them, an article that's interesting in their world, whatever. This is a lot of what I talk about with my pitching methodology, is that you're going to just stay on their radar. And so it's going to be that fourth or fifth monthly nurture. Oh, thank you so much. I'm so glad you reached out because something just slid across my desk. This is perfect. Let's talk. This is how it happens. So the likelihood of you pitching them and reaching out and them getting super excited about paying you 10 grand to be sponsoring your event is low. It's super low. And just assume that's your baseline expectation. And so if sponsorships is going to be an ongoing part of your revenue strategy, you have to look at it. You have to stretch the time horizon of the return way out.
Makes a lot of sense. And kind of just as you're talking, the way I think it confirms kind of the way maybe we're thinking about it is we don't need any sponsorship for us to do this thing. We're going to still do it. So it's almost, I like it as a thing, kind of putting us on a deadline to say, okay, we've got a week. Let's put ourselves on a bit of a deadline to start to nurture these relationships and say, yeah, we do have this thing. But the good news is that we're going to do it regardless, which feels good. It doesn't feel like, okay, we need this. So there's not a desperation there, which feels good.
The other thing too, I hope that this sparks in your mind, having more events like this or more tentpole moments, whether it's quarterly or annually or whatever, is a really great reason to reach back out and nurture brands, reach back out and nurture partners, as well as serving your community, right? Like doing more of these types of things. It's very much aligned. So it's like, oh, we're doing the quarterly. Like for example, I just did what I call the 7-day pitch challenge. And so, it was like a 7-day sprint. Like we're going to do each day of the 7 days, we're going to do one thing. Like for day 1, we're going to learn about how to craft the pitch. Day 2, we're going to learn about, we're going to give feedback on the pitch. And day 3, we're going to learn about how to figure out who to contact. And so all these like ideas. And so this was the very first one I just launched, but you better believe for the next one, I'm going to get it sponsored. I'm going to go out there and be like, I've got this data, I've got these results. I'm going to go out there. You want your brand in front of our really engaged people who are like, investing money to learn a skill. Like this is not just people screwing around on TikTok. I have my course sponsored. Going back to this idea around like everything is bespoke, I had all these sponsors coming inbound like, oh, we want to do a YouTube video, or oh, we want to sponsor the newsletter, or all of this stuff. And they kept saying like, we've done it before, but we've struggled to like find people who are like willing to invest, a certain amount of money for things. I said, well, how about the course? These are people paying $3,000 for the live cohort. Like, these are clearly people who are like investing in their business as a creator. And so I invented something. I said, okay, I now have the Rising Creator Grant. I created a grant. I said, okay, here's what's gonna happen. You're gonna pay for those people to participate for free. I get more course enrollments. I will talk about you at a strategic section during the course. I'll talk about you on social media. Everyone's happy. The creator loves you because they got to participate for free. They're advocates for your brand now. And you get to be in front of everyone in the course who potentially might invest in your thing. Again, I invented it. It's not like a podcast insertion, or it's not like a content format that is like now sponsorable. It's like I invented it based on what the brand told me their objectives were.
I love that. What a great way to create that synergy. I love that.
For maybe the parallel for y'all is like you have some sort of much more advanced education product, coaching services, writing support, whatever, people who are investing in that. And then you have a grant for that is sponsored. You say, hey, we have, 10 spots, per quarter or whatever, and they're supported by XYZ. We're going to talk about them. We're going to bring someone in from their marketing team or a research and development team. This is what I do. So like if they purchase a certain number of seats, then someone from their team gets in to come and do a guest session.
It's fascinating. Just a question on numbers. I'm curious about when you were talking about your course to these sponsors, how do you know what numbers are impressive, and how are you measuring engagement?
The numbers, it's my hell yeah number. Hell yeah. I would be stoked if they would be down. That's my approach for sponsorships in general. It's like, if I'm not sure of like, I don't really know what to charge for this type of thing. If they pick package 1 and it's $5K, I'm going to be stoked. Like, I'm not going to resent it. I'm not going to be like, oh, they picked package 1. Oh man, now I got to do this. Like, that's not what I want to do. But for the course, it's very clear. It was like, it's $3K per seat. So 3 seats, $9K. Like it's just like cost basically of purchasing someone's enrollment or their seat for the course. So that it was pretty easy to pick pricing for that.
And flipping that, so when you're pitching them about how attractive your course is, how do you know what is a good number? You're saying I have exposure to X number of students. They invest on average this much. How are you proving yourself, I guess?
There's 3 different objectives that every brand will have when they want to partner with anyone, right? It's brand awareness. I call it my ARC framework, ARC. Awareness, repurposing, content repurposing, or conversion. So an awareness campaign is where, again, the brand just wants to spread the word about a new product launch, or now they're available in a new territory. And so the KPI, or the key performance indicator, is impressions, right? Engagement, comments, increased brand, share of voice, like a lot of these kind of higher level metrics. For a repurposing campaign, the primary reason when you say, hey, what would success look like for you? Because you're asking them, what would a win look like? And they say, oh, well, we just love like the way in which you guys create content or the business that you've built. We would love, once you create that video or once you create that podcast ad read, we want to create a 30-second cut down of it and run ads with it, or put it on our website, or repurpose it on social media to say that we're partnered with LWS. If they say that, that's a repurposing campaign. And if it's conversion, that's where they're saying trial signups for our software program, number of Moleskine notebooks sold. Like, that is a conversion focused campaign. What you lead with in your proposal should be aligned with their objective. Don't be giving them numbers around number of students that we have or number of blah, 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 blah. If they only care about conversions, hopefully your case study can be focused on just that metric that they care about. And so again, going back to the whole bespoke proposal idea, it's that you're going to be only including packages to them that align with their goals, essentially.
Okay, so we really have to be clear on what they want, because I'm thinking about some of the emails that we drafted, but actually we need to be very clear on what they want. And then, as you said, it's ARC, so one of those 3 is what we're...
It could be a mix of... Sometimes brands will be like awareness and conversions. Like, sometimes they don't know, right? And so now it's time for you to educate them. Because if you think about it, the way in which you tactically execute an awareness campaign versus a conversion campaign is different. With an awareness campaign, thank you so much, the London's Writers Hour, London's Writers Salon Hour, sponsored by Moleskine. And then you don't talk about them for the rest of the hour. That's an awareness campaign. A conversion-focused campaign is click the link in the description of the podcast. LWS10 gets you 10% off your first purchase. That is a conversion campaign. And so you have to explain this. That is probably, if you want to accomplish multiple objectives, it's probably going to take multiple activations. You should sponsor 5 of our Writers Hours. You should sponsor the 24 Writers Hours event. You should sponsor the podcast. You should if you want to accomplish all these objectives, we got to do multiple touch points. It's the marketing rule of 7. You probably have to be exposed to a message 7 times before you take action. So a lot of this comes down to educating yourself as a business owner, as a creative, as a creator, to understand kind of advertising strategies so that you can sit a sponsor down sometimes who, may not understand it. I think a lot of times we as creatives think that brands understand all this stuff, and a lot of times they don't.
Yeah, so my hunch is that we almost have 2 people in 2 categories as we reach out. It's the relationships we've already built. So like we've already put in years of reps that we can maybe be a little more forward, I guess, and just saying, hey, checking in, we kind of aware of your goals, like we've got this thing, wonder if there's a place for you here. And then for the people we've never talked to, it's probably more of a, hey, like, let's learn, here's what we do, we'd love to help support your mission.
I'm so glad you brought this up because it's contextual. Every relationship is contextual. You're not going to do the formal buttoned up, tuxedo pitch to someone that a relationship you've had for 4 years. It's going to be a casual thing. Hey, let's catch up, like let's talk, like this type of thing. And then the people who don't know you do need to do that because they don't know who you are. What were some of the major takeaways that y'all had from our conversation?
Going back to the beginning, just this idea of actually a sponsorship, trying to get sponsorship starts a lot earlier than you realize. And it starts with nurturing that relationship, just like you would any relationship. You're trying to understand what that person wants, what they need in order for you to be able to serve them. And the fact that it has to be so personalized. I mean, we talk about query letters and how every letter to a literary agent has to be personalized. Well, it makes sense that every letter that you send out to a sponsor, a person on the other end, has to be personalized. So that's one of the takeaways.
Yeah, I think one of the main takeaways for me is the reframing of no one cares about our timeline. So as we go to reach out, to still just remember the basics of what Parl said is like just thinking about them. What are your goals? Listening. Let's build a relationship here. And we have this thing going on instead of like, here's this great thing, you need to get involved. So that cemented for me. The other thing, my other takeaway is just hearing you talk about the courses and like the sponsored places. And actually, I think one thing we can be doing, and this is a broader conversation of everything we do, is like everything we do, where is a place for a sponsorship? Everything, whether it's a ticket to an event, a spot on a course, writer's hour, anything at all, like we should be thinking, is there a sponsorship real estate spot for this? So it kind of expanded my mind to think about sponsorship is broader than just a particular event. Sponsor this thing.
One more takeaway I have is just the context you gave around including stats. So just putting in blanket stacks around look how many friends we have, look how many people follow us, look how engaged we are. That's not helpful without the context of what they're looking for. So going back to that awareness, repurpose, and content.
I'm so thrilled to hear you had so many takeaways, and if I could be so bold as to have a takeaway as well, it's that I do think that involving your audience and your community in a lot of these conversations and be very vulnerable and say like, I can tell you guys are very mission led, very heart led. And so like, I think it's totally reasonable to like involve your audience in some of these big business decisions that you're thinking about making and saying, hey, like you said, you're not Scrooge McDuck. You don't want to run away to the Cayman Islands. You want to like have more resources to invest back into the community. And so like helping understand what types of things would you like to see us do that we're not currently doing? And then if you get these survey responses and you'd be like, oh, everyone wants a X, we want like paid coaching or something. I don't know. You figure out what those things are and you say, okay, wow, this is amazing. 72% of you are asking for this thing. That's our marching order now. We're going to go out and figure out how we can make this happen, how we can fund this. And one of the ways we're going to fund it, sponsorships, or one of the ways we're going to fund it is increasing this tier of the Patreon or whatever, right? And so it becomes like Matt and Pearl did this in a vacuum as authoritarians. It's not that now. It's a direct response to like what your audience is asking for. And so it's not scary anymore. It's like, hey, you told me you wanted this thing. Here we go. We're doing it. Right. And so I think that to me is like a really important factor. Whatever you decide to do, whether it's sponsorships, whether it's anything, involve your community because it's not going to be scary after that.
Great takeaways, Justin.
Yeah, so helpful.
Really appreciate this.